Imagine a woman being led through the streets, her head trapped inside a cage of cold iron. Crowds jeer as she stumbles, unable to speak, unable to even close her mouth. A bell hangs from the device, announcing her shame with every movement. This is not a scene from a horror movie. This was real life in Europe just a few centuries ago. The Scold's bridle, also known as the branks, was one of the most chilling tools of public humiliation in history. It was not designed to kill. It wasn't even meant to draw blood. Its purpose was far crueler, to break a woman's spirit, to silence her voice, and to turn her into a living warning for others. Today, we're diving deep into the dark history of the Scold's bridle, how it worked, who made it, why it became so feared, and what it tells us about power, gender, and control in the medieval and early modern world. To understand the Scold's bridle, we first need to understand its world. Europe between the 16th and 18th centuries was a place of harsh order, where social reputation mattered as much as survival itself. Town squares doubled as courts, and punishment was rarely hidden behind closed doors. Justice, or what passed for it, had to be seen to be believed. In this climate, women accused of being scolds, a term for someone who spoke too freely, challenged authority, or gossiped too loudly, became targets. The word scold didn't simply mean nagging wife, as it's sometimes portrayed today. In legal records, it referred to a woman accused of disturbing the peace through her words, and that was considered a real crime. When fines or warnings weren't enough, authorities turned to something much more visible and humiliating. Enter the Scold's bridle. The Scold's bridle was a gruesome-looking headpiece made of iron, crafted to fit tightly over the skull like a cage. A flat piece of metal called the bit or tongue piece extended into the mouth. This prevented the wearer from speaking, and in many cases it was designed to make speaking painful. Some bits had spikes, so if the woman tried to move her tongue or cry out, she would wound herself. Straps locked the entire contraption under the chin and behind the head, ensuring it couldn't be removed without a key. Some bridles even had chains attached so the woman could be led through the streets, and many had small bells to attract attention as she passed. The device was light enough not to kill but heavy enough to exhaust. A single hour wearing it could feel like torture. Imagine your jaw forced open, your saliva pooling, your neck stiff from supporting metal while people hurled insults at you. The pain wasn't just physical, it was deeply psychological. Though most closely associated with Scotland and England, Scold's bridles were documented across Europe, from Germany to Sweden. They appeared in the mid-1500s and continued to be used into the early 1800s. Court records describe women being bridled for everything from spreading rumors to speaking out against a neighbor's business. In some towns, husbands even requested their wives be punished this way if they felt disrespected. The device symbolized something larger than just discipline. It was about control. In societies where women had little legal standing, silencing a woman's voice was seen as preserving social order. A man shouting in anger might be fined, but a woman doing the same could find herself shackled in iron and paraded like a criminal. Unlike execution devices or torture racks, the Scold's bridle was not meant to end a life. In fact, its cruelty lay in its very restraint. The wearer was kept alive and fully conscious to experience every moment of public ridicule. The humiliation was the punishment. Townspeople were encouraged to jeer, to throw garbage, even to follow the bridled woman as she was led from her home to the market square. Authorities believed this public degradation would teach her a lesson and discourage other women from stepping out of line. This wasn't just about gossip, it was about power, gender, and fear. When society decided that a woman's voice was dangerous, it built a tool to erase that voice altogether. Imagine you are standing in a bustling English marketplace in the year 1620. The air is thick with the smell of bread, sweat, and wood smoke. Farmers hawk their wares, children dart between stalls, and then a commotion begins. A woman is being dragged toward the square, flanked by constables. In their hands is something that glints cold in the daylight, a cage of iron shaped roughly like a human head. This is the Scold's bridle or brank, and it is about to be locked over her face. The first references to the Scold's bridle date back to the late 1500s in Scotland and northern England. It was designed to punish what the law called common scolds, Women accused of being quarrelsome, gossipy, or disruptive to the peace. Why women? Because the legal definition of a scold itself was gendered. Men who shouted in taverns might be fined or jailed for disturbing the peace, but women who argued too loudly at home or in public were labeled as moral threats. Figures who upset not just neighbors but the entire social order. The bridle spread quickly across Britain and parts of continental Europe. It became a symbol of patriarchal control disguised as civic order, a way to discipline women without leaving physical scars, but instead inflicting public shame. A scold's bridle was usually made of wrought iron. It fit over the head like a helmet or mask with straps that locked at the back. The most terrifying feature was the bit, a flat piece of iron inserted into the mouth to hold down the tongue. In some cases, the bit was simply smooth. In others, it had spikes or a serrated edge that pressed against the tongue, ensuring that even the smallest attempt to speak would bring pain. A chain often hung from the front, so that constables or even ordinary townsfolk could lead the wearer through the streets. The punishment was public by design. The message was simple. A silent woman is a virtuous woman, and a talking woman must be taught her place. Contrary to some later myths, not every village was full of bridled women. This was not an everyday device. But when it was used to make an example. Court records show it targeted wives who defied husbands, market women accused of cheating, midwives who spoke too freely, or simply those who insulted a neighbor of higher status. It was also used against women accused of witchcraft, reinforcing the connection between outspoken behavior and supposed moral danger. Men were rarely, almost never, subjected to the bridle. This wasn't just about silencing quarrels. It was about controlling gender roles in an age when social order was considered fragile, and women's voices were treated as inherently dangerous. The punishment almost always took place in public. A woman wearing the scold's bridle would be marched through the streets, sometimes led on a rope like an animal, sometimes chained to the town cross for hours on end. Children would jeer. Neighbors might throw garbage or spit. The goal wasn't only to silence her tongue, it was to destroy her reputation. In small communities, that could be worse than any fine. And the irony? Many of these women were being punished not for lies, but for truth spoken at the wrong time. Why such cruel measures? Because early modern society feared disorder above all. The voice of an angry woman was seen not as personal frustration but as a crack in the foundation of the household, the village, even the kingdom. When we look at the scold's bridle today, it seems monstrous, a cage designed to crush individuality. But to its makers, it was simply a tool to keep the peace. And this raises a chilling question. What does it say about a society when peace means silence? The scold's bridle was not hidden away in some dungeon. It was designed to be seen. That was its real power. Imagine the cobblestone square of a small English town. This market day, vendors call out the prices of their bread and cheese. Children chase one another between the stalls. Then, silence spreads, like a ripple through water. All eyes turn to the center of the square. There, a woman is being led forward by the constable. Her head is encased in a heavy iron frame, with a grotesque plate covering her mouth. This wasn't just punishment. It was theater. The bridle worked by harnessing shame. Being forced to wear it told the world, this woman talks too much. She does not know her place. A short chain was often attached to the front, allowing her to be led through the streets, jeered at and humiliated. In some towns, the chain was even fixed to the wall of a public building, forcing the accused to stand motionless as passers-by gawked. The pain was not just psychological. The bit or gag inside the mouth sometimes had a sharp spike designed to press against the tongue. If the victim tried to speak or even swallow, it would dig in. The cruel message: be silent or suffer more. But the humiliation went deeper still. Many bridles were engraved with words or symbols describing the crime: gossiping lips, wagging tongues, or vulgar phrases. The punishment marked not just the woman, but also her family. Husbands, sons, and daughters would have to live with the whispered knowledge. Their wife or mother had been paraded through the streets like a criminal. And this wasn't a rare occurrence. Historical records from the 1500s through the 1700s show that scold's bridles were used across Britain, Scotland, and parts of Europe. In some places, they were even stored as part of the official town equipment, right alongside stocks, pillories, and whips. This raises a haunting question. Why were authorities so eager to silence women in public, while men who caused disturbances were often fined or warned? The answer lies in how deeply gender roles were enforced. The Scold's Bridle was not about protecting the peace of the town. It was about protecting the power structure of the town. The victims of this punishment were usually not violent criminals. They were midwives, widows, market sellers, or outspoken wives, women whose voices threatened the order of the household or the marketplace. A woman who challenged her husband, accused an official of cheating, or even spoke out about unfair prices could suddenly find herself labeled a scold. This label was dangerously vague. Scolding could mean anything from public arguing to simply speaking too much in the wrong company. It became a tool to keep women from questioning authority. If men fought loudly in the street, they might spend a night in the stocks. If women did the same, they were muzzled, literally. Some of the surviving bridles are works of grim craftsmanship. One from Scotland features devil horns on top, branding the wearer as a servant of evil. Another, preserved in the town of Newcastle, has an inscription that reads, "Chester presents this bridle for the punishment of the tongue." This wasn't just discipline, it was propaganda. By parading one woman through town, the authorities warned every other woman. This could be you. But what did it feel like to be inside that iron cage? Historical accounts suggest deep fear, isolation, and despair. A witness from 1623 wrote of a woman carried through the market with the branks, and they're exposed to great shame. People threw rotten food. Children pointed and laughed. There was no way to hide, no way to plead for dignity. This wasn't meant to reform anyone. It was meant to crush them. And yet, not every townsperson applauded. In some cases, neighbors protested. In rare instances, women themselves secretly sabotaged the devices, bending the metal out of shape to help a friend avoid the full punishment. Such acts of quiet rebellion remind us that even in oppressive times, people could still recognize injustice. The Scold's Bridle shows how far fear can go when it is given a face and a form. By turning punishment into public theater, communities convinced themselves they were protecting order, even as they trampled basic humanity. But the story of the Scold's Bridle does not end in the 17th century. The Scold's Bridle may feel like a relic of an age long gone, yet its shadow lingers in ways more subtle than iron chains. By the late 18th century, many towns and cities had abandoned its use, not out of a sudden surge of compassion, but because legal reforms and changing cultural attitudes rendered it outdated. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, slowly chipped away at punishments that relied on sheer cruelty and spectacle. But what replaced it was not always kindness. Instead of iron masks, women accused of gossip, defiance, or unwomanly behavior were more often punished socially, through slander, ostracism, and the slow violence of ruined reputations. Courts moved indoors, away from public squares, but the goal of control remained. Women were still expected to be silent, deferential, and useful, not loud, independent, or outspoken. In some towns, bridles were preserved as curiosities, locked away in dusty cabinets or hung on courthouse walls. Visitors would stare at them as if they were quaint antiques, forgetting the screams and sobs that once echoed through the streets when these devices were in use. In others, they were quietly discarded, buried or melted down, as if to erase the evidence of an uncomfortable past. The question we must ask is whether such punishments ever worked in the first place. Did they stop gossip? Did they make communities more peaceful? Or did they simply terrify people into silence, at the cost of justice, truth, and humanity? Historical records suggest that while individual women were indeed silenced, sometimes for life, the practice created an atmosphere of fear rather than harmony. People still gossiped, still criticized, still whispered. The difference was that now they whispered more carefully, in private, always looking over their shoulder. Power, not peace, was the true outcome. And who decided what counted as gossip? Almost always, it was men in positions of authority, constables, magistrates, or husbands, who decided when a woman had crossed an invisible line. A merchant could slander a neighbor without consequence, but a wife who complained about abuse might be punished for scolding. The line was arbitrary, and that was the point. The bridle was a weapon dressed up as justice. Even when not used, the mere threat of the bridle was enough to shape behavior. Imagine living in a small village where everyone knew that the iron mask sat in the local jail, waiting. Even if it had not been used in years, its presence loomed like a warning bell. Parents told daughters, "Mind your tongue, or they'll bridle you." Husbands pointed to it when arguments broke out. Silence was enforced not only by iron but by fear. Some women internalized that fear. Diaries from the period reveal a chilling self-policing. Women apologizing for speaking too much, for contradicting men, for being too sharp with the tongue. Even centuries later, echoes of this conditioning remain in the cultural expectation that women should be agreeable, soft-spoken, and not too loud. Today, the Scold's bridle stands as a symbol of how societies have tried to control women, not just physically, but socially and psychologically. It is a reminder that the tools of oppression do not always vanish when the hardware disappears. Iron bridles may no longer exist on street corners, but the idea behind them, the demand for silence, the punishment of outspoken voices, can still be found in subtler forms around the world. In some cultures, women who speak out against injustice are still branded as troublemakers. In workplaces, women who assert themselves may be labeled difficult, while men who do the same are praised as leaders. Online, outspoken women often face harassment and threats designed to shame them into silence. These are not iron masks, but the logic is hauntingly similar. Today, many bridles are displayed in museums across Europe, in England, Scotland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Tourists gawk at them, snapping photos, but often miss the deeper lesson. Some displays frame them as oddities, as if they were little more than cruel jokes from a barbaric age. But others take a more serious tone, explaining the human suffering behind the rusting metal. In museums that tell the full story, the bridle is shown alongside court records, testimonies, and portraits of women who endured such punishments. These exhibits do not laugh. They remind us that behind every artifact is a life, a face, a voice that someone tried to erase. So, what do we make of this strange device? A cage for the mouth, a punishment for the voice? It is tempting to leave it buried in the past, to dismiss it as a curiosity from a less enlightened age. But to do so would be to miss the lesson entirely. The Scold's bridle is not just a piece of iron. It is a mirror. It shows us how far we've come, and how far we still have to go. The Scold's bridle may be a relic of the past, but its shadow lingers. Today, we might shake our heads at such a crude device, an iron mask to silence women, to make their very breath a spectacle of shame. Yet history warns us that silencing voices rarely ends with a piece of metal. It is an idea, a belief that some people must be controlled, humiliated, and restrained simply for speaking. The iron has rusted, but the question remains. Who decides which voices deserve to be heard, and which must be crushed? As you've seen, the Scold's bridle wasn't just a punishment. It was theater, intimidation, and a weapon of power. Its legacy reminds us that the line between justice and oppression is often drawn by those who hold the key. Thank you for walking through this dark chapter of history with me. If you found this story eye-opening, make sure to subscribe to Dark Era Echoes, where we explore the tools, trials, and terrors of humanity's past. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the world of medieval punishments and forgotten truths. And I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think the Scold's bridle says about society then? And maybe even now? Leave your comments below. Your perspective helps keep this conversation alive. Until next time, remember, history is never truly silent. If you listen closely, you can still hear the iron whisper.